Good morning, everyone. Dr. Jamal, thank you so much for the introduction. It is an honor and a pleasure to be here in Qatar, to be able to talk about building a culture of accountability. It is a very sensitive subject for us all. I like to say not everyone is a gymnast, not everyone is an astronaut, but everyone is indeed a judge. This is an hour about how we judge each other, how we bring accountability into our cultures, or what accountability looks like in our cultures. And I'm going to share at least one story and at least one perspective about what accountability looks like, so that you can judge me. I am an engineer and an attorney. My wife says I went to engineering school. That's where I lost my personality. Then I went to law school, and that's where I lost my soul. So you could take it for what it's worth as we go through this. All right, I want to start the presentation about describing who I am. I am an inherently self-serving, occasionally altruistic, happiness-seeking, inescapably fallible pack animal, blessed or cursed with free will and a mistuned ability to see and avoid hazards in the world around me. That is who I am. I'm inherently self-serving. My kids and I will wait in line to watch the next Avengers movie. We will run into the theater. And rather than run to the side seats to altruistically give the center seats to those who couldn't make it on time, we run to the center seats. It's every man for himself. It is that inherently self-serving nature of who I am as a human being. In the States, Thomas Jefferson wrote, "Life for liberty and the pursuit of happiness. I'm a happiness-seeking individual. I want to live a happy life. I do so with an inescapable fallibility, that I make mistakes. I am destined to make mistakes. It's not a disease. It's something we cannot cure. I'm an inescapably fallible human being. I'm a pack animal. I like American football. I like the New England Patriots. And if I like the New England Patriots, it means I must not like all the other teams. I hang with people who like my team. Working in healthcare organizations, we see this. Academic medical centers, the physicians will sort of run as a herd. You'll see the dietary technicians stick together. We're a bit like pack animals. We have free will. We can make choices. It's a wonderful thing. It's a blessing. But perhaps if you're the safety officer trying to get individuals to wash hands, it's a bit of a curse. We can write a rule that says wash hands, but the human beings who are tasked to follow that rule can make the decision. They can say, I choose not. I'll take it under advisement. And I have a mistuned ability, and I'm going to talk about this in the presentation, a mistuned ability to see and avoid hazards in the world around me. I have a bit of a tool inside that tells me about hazards in the world around me, but it was designed for yesteryear. It was designed for evading the lion out on the savannah. It wasn't designed for 1 in 10,000, 1 in 100,000, 1 in a million, or even the 1 in a billion risks that we see in aviation. So that's who I am. Let me take you to New York. I recently left Texas and moved to New York. We left one state. Texas is, we like to think of ourselves as a little country in Texas, actually. Moved to a very different culture, New York City. And this is what it looks like on the streets of New York. It's altruistic. We have a vision in New York of 0 fatalities on the road, 0 accidents. And this is going to speak to our culture. We have a vision of 0 accidents, and we've designed a wonderful system. We create lights. Red means stop, green means go. We even put up signs for pedestrians that the red hand means don't go, and the green person means it's time to go. A very basic set of rules that describe how we're to conduct ourselves on the streets of New York. If you look at the data, we kill about 150 to 200 pedestrians a year. That's a 737, an A320 crashing each year and killing everybody on board. 150 to 200 pedestrians, well, how can that be if we have a vision of 0? 0 accidents. If you've come to New York and you walk the streets of New York, one of the things that you'll find is that nobody follows the rules. Nobody follows the rules. Everybody crosses on the red. Cars enter the intersection when they're not supposed to. If there was we might have designed a good system, but the human beings in those systems aren't anywhere close to following the rules. And mind you, these aren't the visitors. These aren't the visitors who come to New York. There's 8 million people in New York, 1.6 million on Manhattan Island. And during the day, people flood in from the other boroughs to work in Manhattan. Physicians, nurses, a lot of health care in Manhattan. People walking to the streets, those people who aren't following the rules, who are crossing on the red. Those same physicians and nurses and pharmacists and dietitians that are going to be helping you when you're in a hospital. Vision 0. Makes me want to just turn to somebody who's crossing the street and say, hey, take the earbuds out. Stop looking at your phone. Look. Read the signs. Stop. Do the right thing. We're killing 150 to 200 pedestrians a year. Our vision is 0. If we're going to get to 0, here's what you need to do. It's one of the things, it's just part of our culture. And I'm going to come back to talk about why that is part of our culture. The behaviors you can expect of me as that inescapably fallible human being. One is I am going to make mistakes. It's just inherent in who I am. I'm going to do things that I never intended to do. There's a lot of words we use for it: slip, lapse, mistake. We'll say errors of commission, errors of omission. There's a lot of words to describe when other people do other than what they should have done. Inadvertency is the hallmark of human error. It's the things I never intended to do, but they still happen to me. They still happen to me. At-risk behavior. I'm going to make choices. Sometimes I make choices where I don't appreciate the risk of the choices I make. They become norms. Dr. Rene Almaberti calls it the normalization of deviance. We'll just get caught up in patterns where I drift away from doing the right thing, thinking I'm in a safe place. Semmelweis taught us about hand hygiene 150 years ago. Wash your hands. In the U.S., our hand hygiene compliance rate with the CDC standards is about 60%. 6 out of 10 times we do it as we're supposed to do it. Yet it's pretty clear it's a good thing to do. It's at-risk behavior. We drift away from what we were taught. We drift away from what is the right thing to protect each other. And occasionally, you're going to see me make a choice. You're going to see me make a choice where I gamble with others. It's called reckless behavior. The British will call this gross negligence. But it's a behavioral choice where I make a choice where I know that what I'm doing is risky. I see it as substantial, I see it as unjustifiable, but I choose to do it anyway. Those are the 3 things that you can expect of me in varying proportions to do as a human being. With me as your employee now, that inescapably fallible human being, how do you produce good outcomes? If you have an institution with 5,000 employees, how do you get 5,000 inescapably fallible employees to produce the outcomes you want to produce? First, we design reliable systems. We design good systems around the providers who provide care. Second, we ask them to make good choices. And that, ultimately, is how we produce good outcomes. To boil it down and make it simple, design good systems and help your employees make good choices. And that's the best we're going to do. If we don't like the outcomes that we get, we have to design better systems. We have to help our employees make better choices. As Dr. Jamal said, there's that system issue. We've been looking at how do we design better systems, and to some extent in the last 20 years, particularly in healthcare, we said, well, it's all about the system. And, well, it's not all about the system. We have to deal with that inescapably fallible human being with free will who has this propensity to drift away from what we ask them to do. It's about systems and choices to produce good outcomes. And as I walk through the presentation and talk about building a culture of accountability, accountability is when we work within a well-designed system and then peers, managers, regulators all act to hold each other accountable for their contribution to system reliability. Human errors don't really show in that equation. The human errors are just the byproduct of system design and choices. Along the way, I'm going to make mistakes. If we want that error rate to go down, design better systems, help people make better choices. Now, I want to talk about an example. And I'm 53 years old. I have to say, even at the time I was 50 years old, I would go out to the motorcycle track and race motorcycles with my 19-year-old son, Adam. We would ride on the track together, and it's called track days. There's about 150 people on the track, 30 riders on the track at one time, 150 people out there for the day. And I'm going to talk about different aspects of the track days, but I want to talk about the track being a place this works well, and I hope that you'll be able to map this in to your environment. And I want to talk about this because of a surgeon I met at the track. This is outside Dallas. This is a surgeon's surgeon. He was a very gregarious guy. You would see him, and there would be a group of riders in the break, a group of riders around this individual. He was in his 40s, but very gregarious. You would think that this person's an astronaut, a surgeon, or a plaintiff's attorney. There was something about this individual just attracted people. And as you got to know him, you would think that this surgeon, if there was a surgeon who said the rules don't apply to me, this was that surgeon. If there was a surgeon that said, I don't care about the universal protocol, I don't care about your safe site surgery protocols, this is me. That was the surgeon, and it was unique to watch him on the track. Out on the track, if we spend a minute on the track, we spend a minute in training. We're wearing these leather suits, full-bodied leather suits, and 20 minutes on the track, 20 minutes in class. We talked about one of the sessions yesterday about simulation. If you're simulating it the day before, well, here we spend 20 minutes in simulation. We talk about track conditions. We talk about possible errors. We talk about the lines to ride on the track. 20 minutes in class, 20 minutes on the track. And then 20 minutes of rest. That's the hour cycle. We would get out onto the track. We would line up our motorcycles like first graders lining up to go to the lunchroom at lunch at school. We just followed the rules. Out on the track, during the day, you would be asked to don an orange jersey, and an instructor would follow you around the track during the session. It's just part of what we did. There are on the track individuals called corner workers. They carry flags with them. They carry a yellow flag to identify caution, to slow down on the track. They have a red flag, which means somebody has crashed on the track. And then they have a red flag, but they have a black flag. And the black flag is if they see you do something dangerous on the track, and these are corner workers, they're every corner, they will point the black flag at you as a rider. And your job was to come into the pits before you got around the track the next time. Your job was to exit the pits. And when you exited the pits, you would be there asked to talk to the track marshal. And the track marshal would say, because he'd talked on radio to the person who was at the corner, the track marshal would say to you, do you know what you did? And you had to be smart enough to know why you got black flagged. If you got flagged, you had to go out, you had to say to the track marshal, here's what I did, all right? And the track marshal's going to say, how are you going to prevent this from happening again? And that's before we finish the next line. And yes, occasionally things don't go well and we run over each other. But this is the track. And I'm going to come back and talk about the track because the track looks very different than the streets of New York City. In the streets of New York City, nobody follows the rules. Out at the track, even my surgeon, the surgeon who you knew wouldn't follow the rules in the OR, was dutifully following the rules just like everybody else out the track. What was happening at the track that wasn't happening on the streets of New York City? Setting expectations. I'm going to talk about how we get to good outcomes. Setting expectations, the first part of this, and I'll talk about it just very briefly, but we're mission-driven in human beings. We pursue missions. If I'm a phlebotomist, my job is to go draw blood and get blood back to the lab. So the surgeon, when they do rounds, will have labs available to them. Missions. Every human being is in the workplace has a mission. They have a mission toward the customers, our colleagues, shareholders, the community. We are mission-driven human beings. And beyond that, there are a set of values that we hold: safety, security, perhaps access, dignity, friendliness. We're asked to protect the values. We pursue missions. We protect values. Everything is about how good can we be around the mission. We reward people around the mission. But then we say, yes, pursue the mission, but protect the values at the same time. Protect the safety. Push people through the hospital. Speed, capacity, important, but protect the values that we hold. Designing safe systems, we decide how good we want to be. We decide how good we want to be, and then we design a system. We recently were working with a New York hospital who, like just about every hospital in the U.S., had a retained foreign object rate around 1 out of every 15,000 surgeries. That's what the data is in the U.S. About 15 to 17,000 surgeries, we leave something behind in the patient. It can be a sponge, it can be an instrument, once out of every 15,000. We set the goal, we said, look, let's do what other high consequence industries do. Let's look what nuclear power does. Let's look what aviation does. Let's set the bar a little higher. Let's turn this into a 1 in a million event. Let's go after making a retained foreign object 1 in every 1 million surgeries. At this institution, it would be 50 years in between retained foreign objects. To get there, as a systems engineer, you have to know what you want to get at. Then you design the system to achieve the results you want. So we set out to design and did design a system that we believe will get us to that 1 in a million. What is good design? Good design is adopting good engineering measures around design, barriers to prevent specific failure modes. If we don't want the switch to be inadvertently switched, we put on a guard. We put in barriers to prevent errors from occurring. We separate oxygen and air such that they can't be cross-connected. We use recovery, the ability to catch failures before they can cause harm, to detect upstream errors. And we use redundancy to provide multiple paths to an undesirable outcome. Redundancy is the key to aviation nuclear power. We have an airplane that will have multiple engines, multiple hydraulic systems, 2 pilots up front. Matter of fact, we just had yesterday an American Airlines flight where one of the 2 pilots died on the flight. Redundancy, you have to have the second pilot there. Barriers, recovery, redundancy, good system design. We do it procedurally as well. Here's a typical design of a process for a nurse or a phlebotomist going and pulling a blood specimen. We get assigned the task, we go grab the pre-printed order out of the computer, we go find the patient, we confirm the patient name and date of birth, we confirm the label against the armband. Is this label now matching this patient that I've now confirmed I have the right patient? I then obtain the specimen, I label the specimen, and then once I've labeled, I go back and I confirm against the armband the name and date of birth, and then I send the specimen off to the lab. A robust process. Is it good design? Good design is design that anticipates human fallibility. Matter of fact, in many industries, in aviation, it is against the rules to have a single human failure or a single mechanical failure which can lead to loss of the aircraft. We have to redesign such that we're not 1 error away from harm. Design that anticipates drift, design that anticipates that human beings will drift away from what they were told to do. design that pushes them back onto the safe path. Good design is design that intelligently uses barriers, recovery, and redundancy. Good systems engineering principles, but that uses them in an intelligent way. I want to give you an example. We worked with Palmetto Health in Richland. This is in South Carolina. It's a level 1 trauma center, regional medical center. They had issues with mislabeled blood specimens, 50 mislabeled blood specimens a month. Now, this isn't 50 where they forgot to dot an I or cross a T. This is 50 where the label on the blood is for another patient than the blood. 50 a month. And this was not inconsistent. This is not inconsistent with our national data. Don Burwick, when he was head of IHI, said Palmetto Richland is a premier hospital. Yet 50 times a month, phlebotomists and nurses would draw blood and then put another patient's label on that blood. They said this is just an unacceptable rate. How can we reduce the rate? So they said their first strategy, well, they're going to implement a red rule. I don't know how many of you in the audience have heard of red rules? Anybody? Yeah, red rules are very interesting. There's a set of rules, I'm not a fan of this, but there's a set of rules that they're called red rules, which means these are the rules you can't violate. Which makes you think about, well, what are the rules that aren't red? Those must be the green rules. Feel free to violate this rule, but don't violate this rule. So the red rule is a very interesting concept. It just sort of recognizes that human beings have free will. They choose not to deviate. But this one, we're serious about this one. Even as parents, we probably have red rules for our children. Boy, this is the one. Don't violate this one. They implemented a red rule. They proceduralized this process. They said for every vial of blood you draw, you're going to confirm the name, you're going to confirm the date of birth, you're going to confirm the MRN, the medical record number, and the account number. One's a 9-digit number, one's a 10-digit number. And you're going to do this for every vial of blood that you draw. The rainbow in the ED, 7 vials of blood. You're going to 7 times confirm a 10-digit, a 9-digit number, and name and date of birth on every vial of blood you pull. Highly proceduralized rule. And then they overlaid a disciplinary threat. They said if you don't follow the rule, you'll be terminated. If you don't follow the rule, you'll be terminated. What did they get? The rate dropped from 50 to 14. From 50 to 14. Does the threat of disciplinary sanction work? The answer is yes. Does it get us where we want to go? I think the answer is no. They got to 14 and they said, look, we've threatened our employees with termination. What else do we have at our disposal? We've highly proceduralized this process. We've made it to the point of being onerous. We said you have to follow the rule. They got from 50 to 14. It was still an unacceptable rate to the leadership of the hospital. They said, what are we going to do now? So they invited a colleague of mine and I into their hospital. We actually came in and we did it sort of pro bono. We said, look, we're going to demonstrate the power of a different set of ideas. Actually, we made him a deal. We said, we'll come in for free for a week. And we're going to get your rate to drop by 90%. But you have to publish the results. If we fail, you got to tell the world we failed. If we succeeded, you have to share this so other hospitals can do it. I said, okay, we'll take on the challenge. And so we put on scrubs. We had a focus group of nurses and phlebotomists, and we went out and watched compliance with this rule. The rule that said if you don't follow the rule, you'll be fired. What do you think the compliance rate was as we walked the halls of this hospital, as we watched phlebotomists at 4 a.m. knock on the door of the patient and say, Mr. Smith, I'm here for your 4 a.m. blood draw? What was the compliance rate? When we talked to nurses, they said, we understand the threat. You mess up, you're going to be fired. You know what the compliance rate was? We couldn't find a single employee who followed all of the rules. Not a one. Everybody understood the threat. Every nurse found their own way to avoid being fired. Nobody followed the rules. Yet the leadership said, of course they're following the rules. Look at the threat. We said we were going to discipline the employees. Better design. We convinced the chief nursing officer to eliminate the threat. We convinced the chief nursing officer to go out to her nurses and say, we will never discipline you for a mislabeled blood specimen. Because actually, if you look at who got disciplined, it's not the people that didn't follow the rule. That's not who got disciplined. Because they weren't looking to who was following the rule. There were no corner workers like at the track. Nobody was watching if phlebotomists and nurses were following the rules. They were waiting, and waiting for what? Harm. They were waiting for the lab to tell us we've had a mislabeled blood specimen. What they were doing was terminating people who were involved in a mislabeled blood specimen. We said reverse it. Tell your employees, tell your nurses you won't be fired for a mislabeled blood specimen. I can say with total confidence, every one of you in the room could say that to your nurses and phlebotomists, because it misses the point. It's not how we hold people accountable. We eliminated steps where there was no reasonable expectation that colleagues would comply. We cut in half the size of the task. We eliminated the MRN review. We eliminated the account number. We cut the size of the task in half. Then we added one step that we call the final check. We said when you draw blood, after you did name and date of birth going into the room, actually about 50% of the time, you do name and date of birth going into the room. Once you have drawn that blood, you hold that blood up against the armband of your patient. You look at the last 3 digits of the medical record number and you read them out loud. You read it off of their armband, 749, then you read them off of each vial of blood, 749, 749, 749, confirmed. You do it out loud so that you hear it, so that your patient hears it, so that your supervisor hears that you're doing it. And then we overlaid the just culture model, and I'll talk about this in a few minutes. We said we're going to hold people accountable for following the check. You're going to make mistakes. Even occasionally, you're going to forget to do this task. But what we can't live with is your choice not to do it. You have to choose every time to do this final check. And when you do the final check, we ask people to raise their hands. If they see the numbers don't match, 749, 648, wait, there's not a match. I raise my hand then and there, and we learn from it then and there. We eliminated the disciplinary threat. We cut the size of the task in half. We started at 50, we got to 14. Where do we get? We went from 14 to 1. My point here is you can't punish people into not making mistakes. It doesn't work. Design good systems, help them make good choices. That's the road to producing highly reliable outcomes. Does the threat of sanction work? Yes, but it only got us to 14. We got from 14 to 1 by putting the accountability where it belonged on the choices that I make as a human being. And you needed to make this final check choice. Every time that you did it, it was a choice you had to make. I want to talk for a moment, and then I'm going to get into the accountability piece, the just culture piece. A note on investigative depth. I walk into a lot of hospitals to see where they're at, and I ask them, would you please pull the records from mislabeled blood specimens? There's a lot of talk at a conference like this about RCAs and doing in-depth investigations. I want to talk about the investigation a local manager does when they found out that their nurse did not properly label a blood specimen. If you go into your safety reporting system and you look at mislabeled blood specimens, I would challenge you to do this. Look at what you learn from those reports. Many of the reports in institutions stop at what you see on the screen. Sally collected blood on the wrong patient. Counseled Nurse Sally. That's it. That's it. That's the whole investigation. It wasn't an RCA. We mislabeled. It was caught in the lab. We stopped. Behind that are a couple of perhaps errors. Actually, one's an error, one's an outcome. But Sally started blood collection on the wrong patient, and when she was done, she did not match the label against the armband. As a matter of fact, when we talked to her, we talked to colleagues, about 50-50 chance that this happens. Keep working our way back. Sally entered the wrong patient room. She confirmed only the last name upon entering the room. She misheard the date of birth. Work your way back. She was distracted by a request from another nurse right in front of the wrong room, or in this case, he had already arrived at the correct room. Working your way back to the systems and choices, working your way back from just the outcome. I would challenge you to look at your investigative records, not the RCAs, but the ones that happened local, the precursors to patient harm. And ask yourself, if we've mislabeled a blood specimen, what do we know? Because mislabeling a blood specimen, and this is I want to be very clear about this, it's not an error. A mislabeled blood specimen is an outcome. The error happened before that occurred. The errors and the at-risk behaviors were the things that happened. The error was I walked in the wrong patient's room. The error was I misheard the date of birth. My risky choices, I confirmed only the last name. My risky choices, I didn't confirm the label blood against the patient armband. Work your way back to those. And then behind those, why did the error occur? Why did the at-risk behavior occur? Taking the time to learn. Just like the track marshal out the track, before you do one more lap, says to you, why did it happen? What have we learned? Well before we have an incident. Well before we have an accident. If we see something risky, what can we learn? Back to us as human beings. Two types of fallibility I talked about. We make errors, we make risky choices. The human errors are the things I never intended to do. They often appear as random, they're inescapable, and again, not fully preventable. I'm going to make mistakes. Choices, they're our product of our free will. They can be fully deliberate and conscious. I can deliberate this. I can make a choice and say, this is what I'm going to do. And some of them become automatic or subconscious. We saw this in one of the presentations yesterday about the eyes and the coffee maker and people putting in more money when there's eyes above the coffee maker. How many have read Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman? Great book. It's a wonderful book. He talks about the fact that you and I have two brains. And I got to talk about this as it leads into the concept I want to put forward. System one is, typo, subconscious reasoning, not unconscious reasoning. Wow, that was a subconscious, unconscious error. I'll get that corrected before this slide deck ever goes out. Subconscious reasoning operates quickly. It's multi-processes. It is the thing that drives you to work. Think about driving to work or walking to work in the streets of Manhattan. You're not thinking about walking to work. You're not thinking about the hazards around you. You're thinking about, I got to get to work. What am I going to have for dinner? Who do I dislike at work? There's all kinds of things you're thinking about other than walking or driving to work. System one is those routines, the things that just drive you along. System two is your conscious reasoning. It's the brain that you're proud of. It's very sequential, just operates on one thing at a time, very effortful. Daniel Kahneman says, we're lazy. We don't like to use that brain. All right? Hates being wrong, loves dilemmas. System one always has an answer. System two is sort of lazy and doesn't like to come up with an answer. So even in the U.S., when we vote for a president, we just sort of look at the person and say, does he look presidential? And that seems to be how we make decisions. It's system one making it, because system two says, I don't want to have to think about it. But we have two systems in place, system one, system two. And a lot of the errors that we make, a lot of the patient safety events involve system one, that subconscious reasoning, the things that we do out of routine. Now I want to talk about a concept that I call the risk monitor. And it ties to this model of perception, interpretation, decision-making, and action. We perceive the world around us, our senses, sight, sound, smell, taste, touch. We interpret what's happening in the world around us, and then we make decisions. So we perceive, we interpret, we decide, and we act. Just a basic model of human decision-making. What I want to talk about is this thing called a risk monitor. It's a background app. You know how on your phone you have apps that launch that are just burning battery power, but you never turn them on? They just automatically came on? Well, we have in us this background app that I call the risk monitor. And it ties back, actually, there's a famous jurist in the U.S., Benjamin Cardozo, a judge, who says there's this thing that we have in us that we call the eye of ordinary vigilance, that we're supposed to walk through life looking for hazards. If we have our eyes open as we walk through life, we're to see hazards in the world around us. And the risk monitor is the tool that picks these up. Otherwise, we're just sort of focused in on the mission, tooling along, but we're supposed to see hazards along the way. An example. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, gas is zero? Actually, you look at this picture and immediately, and faster than you can think about it, your mind says, something's wrong. Something's wrong. That's the risk monitor. The risk monitor says, wait a second, I'm not a ladder expert, but this looks wrong. This just doesn't look safe. That's your risk monitor at work. You could just be walking by, thinking of whatever you want to think about, but that risk monitor inside of you is going to see this and say, wait a second, not a good thing. We're supposed to detect hazards in the world around us. I'm not an electrician, but this just looks wrong. There's something about it. And think about how fast, for those of you to the left, how fast it came out. Because as soon as you see it, your brain processes it. That little risk monitor is knocking on the door of your System 1 brain saying, hello, hello, there's a risk here. There's a risk here. What influences the reliability of the risk monitor? What influences its reliability? Our active thought stays focused in on the mission-driven human being. I'm a phlebotomist. I'm going to get up to the floor. I'm going to go grab that blood and get back. But along the way, I have to avoid hazards. I don't want to breach the privacy of my patient. I don't want to breach the safety of my patient, their dignity. It's our risk monitor at the most basic level that keeps us from causing harm to others. Yet the risk monitor sometimes doesn't work so well. Age, disease, substance abuse, lack of knowledge about the hazard. I don't even see it as hazardous. Excessive time with the hazard. This is an amazing one. The more time you spend with a hazard, the less you see the hazard. The more time you spend, the less you see it. The risk monitor might have initially been firing and saying, whoa! But over time, it's like, what? It looks normal to me now. Missions and values conflicts. Prior to the child being in front of the car, the person tooling along with a burger in one hand, a soda, and a phone in the other hand, is their risk monitor going off? Is their risk monitor knocking on the door of the System 2 brain, the conscious brain, saying, hey, don't do it, don't do it, too risky? Or is this person just tooling along in their daily life, thinking they're in a safe place? Just watch what other people do when they drive down the road. What made physicians smoke cigarettes at work? It's funny, we can look at this today and say, wow, if you saw a person, at least in the States, if you see a healthcare provider smoking while they're taking care of you, it's going to strike you as wrong. There's just something not right about it. That risk monitor is going to go off and say, this is totally bad, wrong. Yet there was a time when the risk monitor wouldn't go off. I mean, maybe we didn't know of the hazard, but even if we did know of the hazard, it was just sort of intellectually we knew of it. But still, I sort of thought I was in a safe place. I don't smoke as much as the next guy. I limit it, 1 pack a day. Right? You just think about it, how our risk monitor reacts. Because if you saw somebody smoking today, you'd immediately say, hey, wait a second. And one of the questions is, would you challenge them? Say, well, look, that's not a good thing to be doing, particularly here in the hospital. I have to talk about the role of sanction for a moment. Sanction is artificial danger. If you write a disciplinary policy, if you put a policy that says we will threaten you with sanction, it is to create artificial danger. You don't need to create the sanction of artificial danger around putting your hand on top of the flame on the stove. People will figure that one out. Put your flame on the stove, you will no longer put your flame on the stove. The natural consequences of burning your hand will take care of it. There are times, though, when we, the human being, don't see the natural consequences. We don't see the natural consequences. When we redesign a process to take retained foreign objects from 1 in 15,000 to 1 in a million, for the practical reality for the nurse or a scrub tech is that this wasn't probably going to happen in their career anyway. At 1 in 15,000 might not happen. At 1 in a million, it's not going to happen to anybody's career in this hospital during the life of their career now. The risks become so small that our risk monitor can't see it. We can't see it because it's not visible to us in any practical way. My kids would sometimes, in Texas, we lived in a house where we had, second story, and we have fire ants in Texas. They're terrible because these ants bite and they sting. If you take a bag of potato chips up to your bedroom and you open that bag of potato chips, but you leave the bag of potato chips, the empty bag in the bedroom, the fire ants outside, 20 feet away, are going to know it. And they're going to start crawling up the outside of the house, and they're going to find a way through the walls, and they're going to get to that bag of potato chips. And if that bag of potato chips is on the bed, they're going to go after, once they're done with the potato chips, they're going to go after the human being sitting in that bed. So I could say to my 10-year-old daughter, the fire ants are going to crawl up the side of the house. This is dangerous. Don't bring food up into your bedroom. Right, Dad? Fire ants are going to crawl up the side of the house? Yes. I don't believe you. Artificial danger is to say, look, here's what comes your way if we catch the potato chips in your room. It's artificial danger, sanction is artificial danger. It gets recognized by your risk monitor. And then alerting your risk monitor, you recalculate the pros and cons of your choices. Nearly every one of us, many of us here have stayed in a hotel. We stay in a hotel, and how many of you have ever left anything in a hotel? Something like a sock, a computer, a child. So you leave something in a room, right? Imagine that it's become an environmental hazard, and that there are a pile of single socks just polluting the landscape, because not everybody leaves, because I have this whole collection of single socks. My wife wants to know, like, where are the other socks? They're like somewhere in hotel rooms. Imagine your employer said, look, we're gonna stop this environmental catastrophe. If you leave something behind in your room and the hospital picks it up, they're gonna call us. Or sorry, not the hospital, the hotel picks it up, they're gonna call us. And for every article of clothing, for everything that you leave behind, there will be a $500 payroll deduct. What would you do? That's artificial danger. Because all you've lost is a sock, but now there's artificial danger of $500. The bad strategy is to lie in bed and say, I think I can, I won't leave anything behind. What you will do is you will redesign your system. You won't put things in drawers. You won't unpack. You'll put your luggage on one bed. You won't unpack. You will walk the zone multiple times before you will redesign your system. The idea of artificial danger is to create this sort of threat, this threat of sanction, such that you make different choices. That's what sanction does. Sanction does not work on human errors. It works on the quality of choices as you get to make choices around the pros and cons of alternative choices in front of you. Progressing toward high reliability, what do? How do we get there? We adopt the mission. We say, here's what we're going to do. That mission is organizational. It's also at a very individual level. What is my task? What did you hire me to do? If I'm a phlebotomist, let's go grab blood. If it's a surgeon, how many surgeries can you do? We adopt a set of shared values. What is it we value here? We let our risk monitors keep us from harming others. As long as I know what we value, my job is just to stay on the safe path. And then when our risk monitors don't exactly work, we overlay rules. We overlay rules that say, here's what not to do. We overlay rules, here's how to do it, procedural rules. And then we hold each other accountable. Again, what you're going to see are the three behaviors: human error, at risk, and reckless. You design a good system. We talk about what our shared values are. We talk about the mission. And then we set the human being free to go work on the system. I'm going to make mistakes along the way. I'm going to drift into risky choices. And occasionally I'm going to put myself at a place where I choose me over you. That's what reckless behavior is. I choose me over you. In the just culture model, we have a very specific set of answers to what do we do with each of these three behaviors. To human error, we say to learn, but to console. We don't choose the mistakes, they happen to us. We have put nurses, we have criminally prosecuted nurses in the US, we have criminally prosecuted pharmacists. Eric Kropp spent 6 months in jail and then 6 months under house arrest simply because he failed to detect the error of a pharmacy technician that worked for him. Upon reviewing the IV bag, he missed the overdose, killed a young child. He spent 6 months in prison. We lost the child, which was a tragedy. We put Eric Kropp in jail for 6 months, which I think was an injustice. Console the error. You and I are inescapably fallible human beings. You know, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, I'm not a pharmacist, I'm an engineer. We look up to our healthcare providers. You do amazing things. You do amazing things. I have 5 kids. I spend a lot of time at the ED with my kids. You do amazing things. I have a lot of expectations for what you do, but one of those isn't, and one of those can't be that you're perfect. You're inescapably fallible human beings. We can't get beyond that. We need to learn, and we need to console. At-risk behavior, we need to coach. We need to coach. We need to coach. I was at a meeting in Chicago, Illinois, on State Street, a very busy street, sort of a very, I guess, dangerous street. I was across the street at McDonald's. I was going to present at a conference. I was across the street at McDonald's. I was eating some breakfast, some eggs and sausage patties, and I was doing my early morning email. Often as you do, you're eating, you're doing your email, and I didn't have any salt and pepper for my eggs, so I stood up in the McDonald's and I walked 20 feet away to get little salt and pepper packets. I came back to my desk, my table, to find what? Many of you would say, well, your computer's missing, but it wasn't. It was there. I sat down to start, continuing to eat my food, and a gentleman, sort of disheveled, I don't know if he looked homeless but he was disheveled. He came up to me, got about 5 feet from me, and he said, I wouldn't do that again. He said, I don't know where you're from, but this is Chicago, Illinois. This is State Street. If you walk away from your laptop, you're going to get it stolen. I just wanted you to know. And I said, thank you. Thank you. I wasn't thinking about it. What was he doing with me? He was coaching me. A stranger walks up to me in a McDonald's and coaches me. Coach the at-risk behavior. It's not discipline. It's an environment where we can each talk to each other. If you see me doing something risky, let me know. Reckless. Reckless is a unique place. Reckless is, I chose me over you. If I'm going to text message and drive while you're sitting in the seat next to me, I choose me over you. I choose my pursuit of happiness in texting while I drive over your life. sanction. The model looks like this: console the heir, coach the at-risk, sanction the reckless. Console the heir, coach the at-risk, sanction the reckless. About 6 or 7 years ago, I walked in the kitchen, saw my son Isaac throwing a fork across the kitchen at the face of his pesky older brother. Narrowly missed his brother's face by a couple of inches. I looked at Isaac, I said, "Isaac, what are you doing?" Well, or whatever parental language you might use. And he said, he knows his dad's a justice guy. He's thinking he's in trouble. He's thinking, how am I going to, what's my answer going to be? So he says, but dad, I missed. That was his entire plea before the court. I missed. He was arguing for a particular brand of justice. There's 4 words to describe his brand of justice: no harm, no foul. No harm, no foul. What we do today in healthcare, what we do today in many societies is we do this, is we write rules, whether they're criminal codes, whether they are HR policies. We write rules that say, sanction the heir, sanction the at-risk, sanction the reckless. Anything less than perfection, we're coming after you. And then they create that expectation of perfection, and then we set them on the shelf, and we say, let's wait. Let's wait for what? We wait until harm occurs. And we go pull that policy off the shelf, we dust it off and say, look at you, you were less than perfect, you caused harm, we're coming after you. Just culture wants to turn the tables. Just culture says, look, I'm an inescapably fallible human being. We have to live with that. But on the other side of that, you have free will, you have choices to make, and you need to be held accountable for the quality of your choices. And oh, by the way, we're not waiting for harm to occur. No harm, no foul has no place in healthcare. It's not about how do we punish the physician who's just caused harm. It's how do we hold the physician accountable before they cause harm. In the States, I can say unequivocally, we played no harm, no foul. We turn a blind eye to the surgeon that produces because they produce for the organization. We don't hold them accountable until harm occurs. That's not how we get to high reliability. That's not a culture of accountability. Console the heir, coach the at-risk, sanction the reckless, independent of harm. Yes, there are processes for repetitive events like repetitive errors, repetitive at-risk behaviors. Both may ultimately lead to disciplinary sanction. But the core of the model, console the heir, coach the at-risk, sanction the reckless. Good system design is easy if you have the time, if you have the budget. Culture is hard. Culture is the hard part. It's easy to design a system. Now I want to take you back to the streets of New York for a moment. Why is it nobody follows the rules? Why is it nobody follows the rules? These are healthcare providers on their way to work, many of them. 10% of them, something like that. Why are they not following the rules? Well, one is their risk monitors aren't going off. They're not seeing this as hazardous. They don't see the 150 to 200 people who die each year. They're just trying to get to work. What's their mission on the way to work? Their mission is to get to work. I want to cross the street. I don't see anybody coming. Yes, I see a red light. I'm not supposed to cross on the red, but I don't see anybody. Maybe I can do it. So we cross. And occasionally somebody who takes that risk gets nailed by the car coming down the road. We don't have a culture in New York City where we hold each other accountable for following the rules. If I turn to somebody in the streets and say, excuse me, sir, excuse me, ma'am, do you know about Vision Zero? We want the 150, 200 pedestrians to be zero. So could you please wait for the light to turn green? Sit here with me. Stand here with me. Take a stand. Role model to your children. Show them what's safe. Can I do that? I'll get shot. I can't do that. The culture is you don't talk about it. I'm getting to work, you get to work, we do it our own way. Every man for himself. Come to the track, you bet you can do it. Come to the track, you can do it. We put people on the corners with flags, you respect the flag. You talk to the track marshal about what wrong. We live with the mistakes. You crash your bike, somebody runs you over, that's just part of the deal of a high-risk sport. We live with the mistakes. But we have a fierce intolerance for the person who's reckless. You're reckless on the track, you won't complete your lap. You won't complete your lap. I actually got to go to a course called the California Superbike School out in California. Christian Bale, who's an actor, works for, he was Superman in one of the Superman series. He's known as this outrageous guy on the set in the movies. He yells and screams at everybody on the set. He was in my group of 20 people. I didn't know who he was until halfway through the day. We don't care if you're Christian Bale. You follow the rules or you're off the track. And the code is that we coach each other. The code is that we hold each other accountable in ways that you don't see citizens holding each other accountable on the streets of New York. It's about holding each other accountable for the choices that we make in the workplace. I'm going to make mistakes. We've got to get over that. But I got choices to make. How are we going to help each other make good choices in our workplace? How do we build a strong culture of accountability? We have, as an organization, a shared understanding of mission and values. We design good work systems around and processes around the employees that we have. It's three-quarters of the deal. Design good systems. Role model and mentor. Show your staff that you're visibly going to do the right thing. Audit. Look for mission and value supportive choices before it leads to harm. Aviation, nuclear power, they spend a lot of time auditing. All right, we don't audit much in healthcare because we're going to hire a nurse. We want a nurse to provide care. We don't want to hire auditors because it's just not sort of part of the healthcare system or the healthcare culture, but ultimately, the auditors help. Those corner workers out the track with flags, we don't have them in healthcare. Particularly if you're a home healthcare nurse, if you're a private practice physician, who's the corner worker? If you start drifting into risky choices, who's watching? Nobody. Audit. Coach. Call it out when you see choices that are unsafe. Call it out. Create a culture where we can talk to each other. And lastly, hold everyone accountable. It's as simple as this on the track: be safe or get off the track. A strong culture of accountability is one where we together understand that we're trying to take, in the US, actually, we're saying 440,000 lives, by the way. NPSF, National Patient Safety Foundation, says 440,000 lives. How do we reduce that number? We create a very strong culture of accountability around what locally look like little risk, but in the macro, across our 5,000 hospitals, add up to a pretty big number. We hold each other accountable. That's how we get there. With that, I want to thank you. How are we doing?
Thank you, David. Thank you very much. I definitely could relate to some of the pictures you put on, especially the one with the 100 plugs going into one wall socket. Reminds me a lot of my computer station back at home. So we have just one or two questions. If anybody wants to ask questions, please come forward for the microphones.
David, you made my conference. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm Tomislav Dumovsky. I'm a Macedonian living in Norway. And this is the first conference when a Macedonian is representing here. So I hope the Macedonian is here so we can welcome a representative from Macedonia on ISQua conference. I hope she's here. And as an engineer, I have a question to you. I'll be washing my hands several times during the day. And I can imagine how difficult it is for the skin of the health professionals to do that each time they see a patient. And I've been a patient. And I see my health professionals, the really professionals in Norway, doing the good job, but we still have 10% complications rate. And the question is, can we find another way to disinfect our hands and not washing down and make the life of our health professionals easier as an engineers?
Yeah, that's a tough question. Clearly, well outside my scope. I've walked around and actually spent a day following nurses and washed my hands in the same way. And by the end of the day, my hands are sort of raw because they're not used to that environment. But even nurses that say, "Look, I washed my hands going out." In the U.S., you got to wash your hands leaving the room, you got to wash your hands going into the next room. Part of the issue is like, how do we create reasonable expectations around what we need nurses to do? I am not I'm not in a position to know what are the things that we can do. Clearly there's things like, putting copper everywhere so that it's antimicrobial, but I think I'll leave that question to others who can figure out how do we not impose upon a nurse in a way that is unreasonable. Because part of the issue is don't ask people to do what you don't expect them to do. And at some point, hand hygiene rules start to verge on beyond reasonable expectation. And that's why, in part, we get some of that 60% rate of compliance.
Take one more question.
David, SF Lui from Hong Kong. Thank you very much for your very interesting talk, which was very useful for everyone. I'd just like to pick on your last comment, hold everyone accountable.
Yeah.
I would like to share, I feel sorry and I share the anger of the front line when something goes wrong. And quite rightly, there are situations where there should be whole accountability. But like a lot of root cause analysis, probably only 30 or 40% of the issue is there. A lot is the system. But we don't hold the management, the hospital accountable. What do you say to that?
Yeah, that's true. Actually, this is top down. When we talk about just culture, we talk about it. Remember, even like the algorithm, we say this is not for an employee. This is for everybody. You can be a reckless employee. You can be a reckless CEO. The issue is the first part of setting up a system is, have we set up a reasonable system for our employees? And then if I'm a manager, I think the fundamental job of a manager is to say, I have to anticipate that my employees are going to drift, which means I need to get out there and, one, be smart about guessing where they're going to drift, where they're going to start to cut the corner, and cut it off before it becomes that normalized behavior. How do I, as a manager, keep my employees on a safe path? So one is designing safe systems around them. Another is being out there helping them get on the safe path. We're just stuck with this. This is who we are as human beings. If we work in a production environment that values production, employees, human beings, are going to start cutting the corner. And so I think there's the issue. If I'm a manager and I turn a blind eye, what is that turning of a blind eye? Is that at-risk behavior? Is that a reckless choice on the part of the manager? So the just culture, everything I talked about here, managers have their job, staff have their job. It's holding everybody accountable for their role within the system all the way up through the board. And so I think it's just how do we hold everybody accountable in the system. I think we have one more.
Yes, one more. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm glad for your last comment regarding the responsibility of the management, because I'm concerned about the precursors to good culture. And I'm thinking about the priorities that the managers do regarding the arenas that they need to facilitate, to do the auditing, and to create the shared understanding. And I think that priority is very sort of marginalized at the front line. And I think it's important to sort of emphasize that priority which is needed to the time workers need to create this mutual understanding.
Yeah, that's right. And I said, I made a point of, on the track, it's 20 minutes on the track and 20 minutes in class. It's actually, healthcare struggles in the fact that I think, I don't want to stand up here and say healthcare is underfunded, which I guess you can say in a lot of ways it is, but we never provisioned inside healthcare for the things that other high-consequence industries do. We have more time in a lot of other industries. If you're a nuclear power plant operator, you do spend time on station, but you spend an equal amount of time off station, simulating and doing the things, and even having those conversations about how do we make choices when I'm faced with dilemmas. that in healthcare we're so busy doing that we don't spend enough time assessing how we do what we do and keeping everybody sort of pointed in the same direction. It's just, we're playing catch up. I mean, and I've talked to healthcare, CEOs of hospitals said, Dave, we're acute care, we're reactive, we're inherently reactive. We don't think in a proactive way. And so I think it's just not part of the culture, and it's clearly not of how we sort of organize the system to provide the time for doing the things that you're saying. Again, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you guys.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you.